I'm here because I had a coffee with a buddy of mine who shared his passion for aviation with me. And I want to be able to do that for others. And it's such a cool, tight-knit community that we can't afford to just be brushing people off.
How many people go through life doing work they really don't like, but every day dreaming of, say, working in the aviation industry? They say it's too late. They think it would be too hard. They think it would go against conventional norms. If you never go after what you want, you'll never have it. This is Fly the Transition. Join us as we soar through the captivating stories of individuals embracing a thrilling journey into the aviation industry. From pilots spreading their wings to mechanics fine-tuning the engines and a myriad of industry professionals, each with a unique tale to tell. Get ready to dive into the diverse backgrounds, the pivotal moments that propelled their leap, and the sheer determination that transformed their aspirations into reality. We're not just about dreams. We're about making them take flight. Welcome to Fly the Transition. And now your host, Jim Schilling.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Fly the Transition. I'm your host, Jim Schilling. Thank you for joining me as we explore yet another journey of aviation career transformation. All right, coming up on this episode, we're going to interview Jason. Jason comes from a background in ministry and real estate and is now working his way into the aviation industry as a flight instructor. His ultimate goal is to work in a corporate Part 135 flight operation as a pilot. He's got a really interesting journey, and we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. So before we get into our interview with Jason, just a few quick updates from me on things I've been working on. As you may well know, the production timeline of the podcast did slow down a little bit so I could work more on my CFI rating. That has been coming along. I'm working now on writing out lesson plans for things like VLRs, navigation aids, navigation in of itself, your cross-country planning, things like that. So moving beyond just the basic maneuvers and into more of the operational aspects of being a pilot and going from point A to point B. Admittedly, one of the lesson plans I struggled with and hit a bit of a snag on was the VOR lesson plan. Navigational aids can be tricky to teach, and I found myself reworking things a number of times, striving to make them more accessible and understandable to potential students in the future. So this was an area during my private pilot that I really struggled with, and I put a lot of pressure on myself, I think, to make the perfect lesson plan so that future students that I had wouldn't have the same struggles or hiccups that I did. So in doing so, admittedly, I've nitpicked my lesson plan just a little bit as I tried to tweak and modify and whatnot, maybe over-engineered things just a little bit. So I'm going to keep fine-tuning that to make that a more solid lesson plan for when I do have to present that to students in the future. Finally, I haven't gotten as much time in the air as I'd like because the airplane that I co-own is currently down for annual inspections. So playing the hurry up and wait game with parts of that inspection itself and hoping to get back up into the air in our sundowner sometime soon. So as we get ready to jump into our interview with Jason, I just want to put out a quick reminder, call to action, if you will. Please go out there, like, rate, and leave a review of the podcast wherever you're listening to this. Believe it or not, your feedback does really help reach out to more people, keeps me motivated to keep bringing you these inspiring stories, and as you'll hear from Jason, sometimes just a conversation and sharing a little bit about aviation can be that spark that somebody needs to really motivate them to explore aviation as either a hobby, a passion, or a career. So if you know someone out there who could relate to or really enjoy this podcast, I hope that you'll share it with them so that we can continue to share these stories and continue to inspire others to chase after that aviation dream. Now, moving into our interview with Jason. He is, as he describes, a make-your-own-way kind of guy. He's had his hands in real estate, took a church from its formative stages to closing, and fell into aviation during a time of transition in his own life. A conversation he had with a friend over coffee led to a discovery flight and being bit hard by that aviation bug. Now Jason's worked through his ratings to become a CFI, CFII, and he's building up those hours and chasing down that dream of a Part 135 corporate flying job. So let's hear more about Jason's story on this episode of Fly the Transition. All right, Jason, thank you so much for joining me on the Fly the Transition podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk a bit tonight about your journey that you're still in the middle of. So you'll be one of the people that we've selected amongst our guests that will follow them along through their process. And we just kind of want to see a snapshot of where you're at right now, but also how you got there, where you came from. So that's what we'll chat about and share with the audience.
Cool, yeah.
All right. So how about you tell me how you first got exposed to aviation?
I first exposed to aviation was a friend of mine. We became friends because I went into Harley Davidson's shop looking for a bike 15 years ago or so.
Okay.
And I met this guy, John. He was a school salesman, whatever. And it was my wife and I. We didn't have kids at the time. We were just looking for a motorcycle. And we started chatting with John. He's a cool guy. Somehow we make friends with him. Exchange numbers and stuff. I end up buying a bike now from him. He doesn't hold that against me to this day, which is nice. But John was into aviation.
Okay.
And he's like, yeah, like we go, I'm getting my pilot's license and all this. I grew up a pilot family. My grandpa's got a Cub, and I think it was his grandpa's Cub. Anyway, I knew nothing about aviation. All I knew was that planes fly in the sky. And they can get you places really fast. And the pilots are probably, rocket scientists that make $3 million a year.
Sure.
That's about what I knew about aviation. And I remember one time we were out on a motorcycle ride. We took a ride into Wisconsin to catch one of the air shows. And John is like, he was reciting the entire pre-flight check and takeoff roll that Fat Albert does. Like he was literally reciting it word for word, and I was like, that's pretty darn cool. Like,
yeah.
But again, like, this was an out of reach thing. Like I had no interest in flying. It was so far beyond anything that I'd ever known. And fast forward here, about 15 years later, and I still friends with John. I actually did his wedding. He and his wife.
Oh, cool.
I was able to perform his wedding, and so we're still friends. We're chatting, and I said, like, all these things that you're doing. He was working for a 135 at the time, and I said, all these things you do are really cool. Like, is there a way that a real estate broker who doesn't work 100% full time could get into flying? And he's like, dude, you got to do it. Like, you'd be awesome at it. And there's an airport about 10 minutes from me. He said, go in there and ask him for a discovery flight. I didn't know what a discovery flight was. I'd never been in a small aircraft before. I hardly knew there was an airport there. So I walked in. They said, yeah, well, when do you want to do it? I said, is today too short a notice? And unfortunately, they said yes. But the next day, I went back with my $100 bill in hand and gave it to him. Went out on a 45-minute flight. We flew over my house, and they let you take the controls. And I was goofing around.
Yeah.
Like, all right, this is cool. My first time in a small aircraft, and got back on the ground, went home, told my wife about it, and 2 days later, I had my first lesson. Just rolled into it there.
The aviation bug bit you hard then, that's what you're saying.
It was hard as an understatement.
So let's talk a bit about how old were you when you were first exposed then to John? I mean, it sounds like if you're buying a motorcycle and you're not like in high school or middle school, so it's not like you grew up with aviation then, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I met John. We were probably 21, 22 at the time, something like that. Fairly young.
Okay. And then, so it's 15 years from that first introduction until you actually get into aviation. Were you doing anything in the background at the time, like air shows or anything that sparked your interest, or?
No, it was like, it was off the radar, it was, and no pun intended there. It's just, it was, I don't want to say out of the blue, but, the church that I was pastoring was kind of in the process of winding down and closing at the time.
Okay.
And I was looking for something, like I said, with real estate, I do it semi full time. But I'm not out there plastering my face on billboards and, bus stop benches and stuff like that.
There are those people though.
I can name one. That's all good.
So with aviation not really being a path that you originally had gone down or that you really explored, tell me about where you did end up.
I haven't like had a defining career, right? out of high school, I say I dabbled in college. I did some college and was like, this isn't for me. I just want to go work and and live my life, And my wife and I, Krista, we got married when we were just 21. We were both pretty young, but we both knew what we wanted in life, and it wasn't to go sit behind a desk for 8 hours a day, and to spend another $150,000 on 4+ years at college. So we just kind of got into life and started doing stuff. I've always, kind of worked with people, and I've always been like a teacher, coach, kind of a person. And so, without a formal degree, I was working at a public schools, like before and after school program.
Okay.
Something that I had done in high school with middle schoolers, and now this was at an elementary school. So we actually both worked for the same district for a little while. And then I left that to go to a company that my dad owned and ran. And it was kind of a change. But he bought and sold like industrial equipment and machinery. And they were looking it was him and his cousin, small company, but they were looking for a way to expand kind of their footprint and their marketplace. And I knew eBay really well.
Okay.
So they brought me on. It was kind of, part-time at first, and ended up being kind of a full-time thing, helping them run operations there, selling stuff on eBay. And then they opened a second warehouse location, and I was kind of running that whole deal. And the whole while, I was like, I don't think my life is, supposed to be sitting on a forklift here. I want to do something else.
Sure.
At the same time, my wife, Krista, and I were heavily involved with a smaller up-and-coming church plant. And we both kind of got approached with this, I would say, undeniable call to ministry. And if you're not in ministry, if you're not a part of a church, you really may not understand. That might seem kind of crazy, but a call to ministry is just something that you really can't ignore or push aside for too long. Despite our best efforts, we ended up in ministry. I was at churches, we were volunteer leaders, and then I became kind of the interim volunteer youth leader when the youth pastor left. That turned into a part-time paid position as the youth pastor. I went to our denomination's seminary and got what is the equivalent of a master's, and ended up being that church's full-time youth and families pastor. Associate pastor, whatever you want to call it. So, I've always had a way of, I've always been kind of a make my own way kind of guy, and not in the, I think I'm doing anything groundbreaking, but I've always got my hands in different things, just trying to, pick and feel what seems right and how I can make it, and aviation kind of fell into that as well with, like I said, kind of a part-time / not quite full-time real estate deal, and looking for something else to do. So
sure. So I'm going to go back on something. You're talking about your call to ministry, right?
Yeah.
With that call, I imagine that there has to be a lot of, or maybe there's not, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine there has to be a lot of thought, prayer, and just contemplation on how that's going to work for you, whether it be challenges or direction, things like that. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Tons of thought and prayer, a lot of denial and running away. But that's I was leaving. I was leaving a really, for all intents and purposes, a really well-paying job with my dad's company, to do this. And it started slowly. Like I said, it was a volunteer thing, and then it was part-time, and it kept building, but it was nice because I had the flexibility and the freedom to go to my boss, who was my dad, say, by the way, I'm only going to be here 3 days a week. You're going to have to figure it out.
Okay. It's probably way easier to have that conversation with your boss when it's your dad, though.
It might be.
I don't think I'd go to my boss tomorrow and go, I'm only coming in 3 days a week from now on. I would love to do that, but I don't think that's going to work.
Well, you should give it a try. See what happens. Right?
I don't think it's going to work.
Well, that's fair. So, that was, there was more to it than that, of course, but that was kind of the gist of it. And, he never pushed back on it. They were very gracious about that, understanding that it was, something that I needed to do and was eventually going to do full time. So, they were, I don't want to say they, put words in their mouth, but it felt like they were just happy to have me, continue to do what I could there while I was making that transition to full-time ministry. So,
okay.
But yeah, leaving that to go to ministry was, an upheaval. I was, like I said, it was a pretty financially healthy job, and I got into ministry, and nobody gets into ministry for the paycheck. It's all for fame and glory. So
I'm sure, yeah.
No, it's a calling, and that's what it is, and we couldn't deny it. So we looked at our finances and said, you know what, we'll find a way to make it work, and it always has. So
that's very cool. I do find it always interesting when people do follow whatever that calling is, and you're not there for the money, you're there for a purpose. So
yeah, certainly.
A quick side note, when I got hired with where I'm working now, that was one of the first things that my boss said. He goes, you're not here because you're going to get rich, you're here because you belong here and because it's a calling and you're here to help people. So
absolutely.
All right. So when you're working in ministry, what did you find the most rewarding and the most challenging part of that job?
The most rewarding is absolutely the undeniable purpose that God has given you for that season in life. You're fulfilling it, and it. You're living it every day. I'm a little bit sarcastic, a little too sarcastic for some Midwesterners. I was born and raised here. I am a Midwesterner, but my personality is not that of a typical Midwesterner. So I'm pretty direct and frank with people, and that comes across way
not the Midwestern, way too aggressive.
Yeah, way too East Coast for people. And then I'm pretty sarcastic. So anyway, the greatest thing about ministry is just knowing you're fulfilling that calling. The hardest or most challenging thing about ministry is the people. And I say that lovingly. I've loved every ministry position that I've had. We planted, launched, and subsequently closed a church. We went through the entire life cycle of a church, and as a lead pastor, I loved everything that I did. It's just people can be difficult, right? And that's what ministry is. It's a spiritual hospital, really. And you're going from one thing to the next. You're going from these mountaintop experiences, just seeing people experience faith for the first time. And then you're also seeing people, in the worst seasons of their lives when they desperately need you, and you're the one thing, that they go to because and it's only because you're the face, right? You're just the mouthpiece or the face or the hands and feet of Christ here in the present day. And you're that connection for them. And it's tough because in ministry, I've always tried to move people to that next, I don't want to say level because that makes it sound like a cult.
I know.
That next season of independence, like, hey, this is your relationship with God, I'm happy to help support you in that. And I want us to be on this, journey of faith together, and not have you constantly coming to me thinking that I'm some wise, nobody wrote as far as I know, I don't have a book in the Bible quite yet. So that can be the hardest thing is trying to gauge the needs of and meet the needs of people that are coming to you with that. And and you're constantly switching. Like I said, it's a mountaintop experience to a, Death Valley experience. Rarely do you get just a nice, steady, even keeled day. So,
right. Well, I really like your analogy of it's a spiritual hospital. The ups and downs I kind of figured as far as the highs and lows and dealing with people at their best and worst in life. But yeah, that's a really interesting analogy with the spiritual hospital. I'm going to have to remember.
Yeah, it really is triage. You've got, when I was lead pastor, we didn't have a large church. When the text comes in or the phone call, it's like, all right, now I have to figure out, which hat I have to put on. Am I consoling you? Am I, helping you with one of these tough biblical, deep biblical dives that you want to do? Am I going to be preparing you for marriage? Am I, going to be, putting my arm around you because you just lost a dear loved one?
Right.
There's a lot that goes on.
How do you start getting into the real estate game then? Is that something you're doing simultaneously with your work with the church?
It was both and. So I got my license when I was still with my dad's company.
Okay.
I went through and got all that, and so then I was just a brand new fresh real estate agent. I was like, yeah, this will be fun. Sure. And I got that at the time that I knew I was kind of transitioning away from that job and into ministry. So it became that helped me get through. And then, as a brand new agent, I was like, sweet, now this is what'll make money, because ministry certainly is not going to.
Okay.
And I quickly found out as a brand new agent with a pretty large local brokerage that nothing comes free. And if you want a bunch of leads from them, it's probably going to cost you more than you're going to make in the first year. So,
okay.
But I made it work. Again, I've always kind of had that way of figuring it out. If it's not going to be with real estate, then what is it? So, I was doing random stuff on the side. I think I was selling stuff on my own on eBay and just just kind of making it work. But real estate was slow to start, but eventually grew. And then I changed companies about a year after I had started. Got tired of paying a desk fee for a desk that I was never at, because I could do everything from my house.
So within your brokerage work, I'd imagine there's probably not just one typical day, and it probably ebbs and flows quite a bit as far as the volume of the work you're getting as well. But is there anything that is consistent throughout your work?
In real estate, the only thing consistent is inconsistency. So
sure,
all realtors kind of, you're told this as a new agent, and it becomes blaringly true, probably especially your first year. It's a feast or famine job. You've got 7 things going on or 0 things. And in the times between, there's a lot of work that I could be doing.
Okay.
If I wanted to, build a social media presence or launch a marketing campaign. But I don't want to, I don't have the drive to do that for real estate. I'm really happy with where everything's at. I want to be I want to be the go-to for friends, family, referrals, stuff like that. That real organic business. I hate the term organic, but that's really the only way to put it. Is that organic business that just kind of grows on its own. And, some months I'm, literally sitting around doing absolutely nothing. And then you get a call, and all of a sudden you've got a new client who, they want to go look at properties, and you're driving an hour and a half, each way to look at cabins, up in central Minnesota. And that's your life now for the next month and a half.
Sure.
Until they find a place and you get under contract. It's either everything or nothing. So
sure. So with that feast or famine kind of pace of things, does that make it challenging for like financial planning? Do you have to be really careful with how you are planning financially based on how many sales and how much commission and stuff you're going to get?
Well, 110%. I mean, and it's hard because you almost can't even plan 1 year to the next.
Yeah.
Unless you have a really, I would say, a much larger client base than I do. It's really hard to plan. I can look at my averages over the last, 10 years and say, well, here's about what I've, could average it out to be. But you have 1 year that you have, 14 closings, and then the next you have 7. So
sure,
what happens? Well, part of that too depends on the value of properties that you're doing. I know, some agents like to, hang their kind of niche realtors, they only want to work with executive properties,
okay,
500,000 plus kind of a thing. Well, that's, it's fantastic because you close one of those and, you've probably got a $40,000 paycheck in your bank account. However, you're not going to get as many of those. And there are agents that are out, doing the opposite. So it's incredibly hard to plan financially. But again, a lot of my life and my attitude toward finances has always been that God will provide what we need. And it sounds, I will say, to the unexperienced or the uninitiated in faith, that it sounds reckless, but I can't think of a single time in our lives that I haven't had what I've needed. There's been skinny months, skinny years, and there's been fat months and fat years, whatever. But we've always been able to make it through. So
what would you consider the pros and cons of the real estate game?
Pros and cons. Pros, it can be such a great business, and again, it's working with people, and I absolutely love it. And
yeah,
I love real estate because it's no longer what it was. This was before my time as a realtor, but the offices used to get the MLS book dropped off weekly. And they got this, 80-page binder of all the new listings that are coming on. And the agents have to go through and sift through all that for their client and say, well, there's this property that I think you might, and they're reading off the details, they're telling everybody. Nowadays, I've got this really cool app that I give all my clients right off the bat. I'm like, here, take this app. You have to have it. Don't go to Zillow. Don't go to Trulia. All they do is scrape, old data. You're going to get worn out stuff that isn't even accurate. So I'm like, here, get this app. It's linked to the MLS because it's my app. They automatically get access to the MLS. So you have to pay to get onto that. So anyway, it's live MLS data right in their pocket. And not that I don't have to, not that I don't want to do that work, but now I don't have to. Clients can see literally, they get a push notification on their phone. Oh, there's a new listing that matches the criteria that I put in for my search. Right. And half the time, they're getting a hold of me before I even know that it's a listing. Yeah, that they might be interested in.
You would know better than I, but you probably see more of that with the technological age that we're in. And people just kind of know what they want for the most part. So you're going to put in your parameters, and that's how I got the house that I'm sitting in right now. We knew what we wanted. We knew the neighborhood we wanted, and we plugged in these parameters, and poof, the house we want pops up with the right floor plan, and called up the agent before even it was out there. So
yeah, and so it's such a beautiful time to be a real estate agent, I think. And I guess the flip side of that, and this might be one of the downsides, it might be the biggest downside, is the amount of bad information out there.
Okay.
I can't tell you how many times I get a text, somebody will send me a Zillow link. Hey, can we go look at this? I'm like, yeah, that one was sold 6 months ago. Like, oh, you got to let them down, shatters their dreams, because this was their house. But, and then I kindly direct them to my app. Hey, get this. We won't have these issues anymore. Yeah, right? It's not a big deal. But, I really love working with people. I love being engaged with them. And, I don't have to sell them anything. Yeah, they're finding the house that they want, or they're telling me what they want at a house anyway, and I can just show them things that would fit that bill. I get to talk with them. I get to walk through houses and experience, and kind of pick up on what they're looking for, a little more detail. Some people, they walk in and they go, oh, it's got honey oak cabinets from the 90s. There's no way we could do this. And maybe we circle back after looking at 10 more houses and say, you know what, we can paint honey oak cabinets. Or, a kitchen remodel is only $30K. Yep. And this other house that you really wanted was, $90K more, and you can't afford that. So
sure.
It's really cool to just work with people. And other times we go through houses and all of us are standing at the top of a staircase looking into a basement like, no, you go first. There's a dead body down there. It's just fun, Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge is just the inconsistency. And I don't know if I'm going to be, driving up to, central Minnesota to show a cabin property tomorrow, or if I'm going to be going on a listing appointment for a $750,000 house.
Sure.
Like you have no idea what it's going to be.
Before we get back to this interview, a quick word from those who make the Fly the Transition podcast possible. Aviation friends, are you looking for eyewear that's as adventurous as you are? Look no further than Flying Eyes Optics. Their ultralight, comfortable, and durable glasses and sunglasses are perfect for pilots. They are designed by pilots, for pilots, and for my money, they're the best aviation eyewear that I have ever had. If you or that special pilot in your life are interested in Flying Eyes, check out our affiliate link down in the show notes and use code FlyingMidwest10 and you can get 10% off your next purchase at Flying Eyes. Aviation enthusiasts, have you heard about my friends over at Pilot Quarters? This pilot-owned family business is crafting your next favorite flying shirt. Their chart-inspired merchandise comes in camp shirts, polo shirts, and more. And by popular demand, they're adding lightweight fleece hoodies and long-sleeve tees to their collection. So head on over to pilotquarters.com today and soar in style.
You're listening to Fly the Transition. If you've ever thought about changing careers and getting into the aviation industry, welcome to your new home. Now, back to your host, Jim Schilling.
At some point, you hit a turning point where you're going to start exploring aviation and exploring it as a career. Tell me about was there like an aha moment, or what made you pursue that actual career?
Well, like I said, I've always kind of made my way. I've always kind of figured out different things, and it was that conversation over coffee with my friend John. It was the middle of winter. It was February.
Okay.
And we were sitting there having coffee, little local shop in Lakeville, and I said, that conversation, is this something that I could do? He encouraged me, he said, you'd be great at it. You should go do it. And, I remember saying, well, is this something that I could do part-time? And the 135 that he was working for at the time, he's like, yeah, I work, 8 on, 6 off, or whatever his schedule was. And he goes, those 6 days I can choose to pick up the phone if they need me, when they call, because they inevitably will on your days off. He said, when they call, I can choose to pick up the phone and go make $1,000. And I, kind of the wheel started turning. I went, really? You could just do that? That's amazing. And granted, those 8 days that you're on, you're owned by them. But I think 8 on for 6 off with the opportunity to still work and make a pretty nice paycheck doing it is, to me, that sounded like a pretty appealing, way to do things. And when you're 8 on, all you have to do is be within whatever, an hour, whatever they call it, an hour or, a 2-hour call out or whatever it is for that particular position. All you have to do is be close enough to get there. So you can still go on with your life. You can still do things. I could still be doing showings, could still be handling phone calls and doing all that stuff. So it was a really appealing transition to make. And, the first time I got on that Discovery flight and, sitting behind all the gauges and switches and levers that I had no idea what any of it did. I couldn't even have told you what an aileron was. I got done with that flight and I was like, I'm hooked. I'm doing this. If, within a year or two, we'll call it, within a couple years, I can be, I can more than likely be at maybe freelancing for some stuff. If I can do that, then I'm in. So
sure. So what does that conversation sound like at home then when you're like, I'm doing this?
Oh, man. This would be a much better question for my poor wife. I think I sold her on it with, we both like to travel a lot. And so, hey, what better way to travel than to call your own shots, get in your own plane, do your own thing. So that was an appealing part of it. And quite honestly, we're both talking about kind of our 10-year-ish plan as a couple, and as a family. In 10 years, our youngest will be he'll be at the end of his high school career, junior or senior.
Okay,
and our 2 older kids will be God willing out of the house, and we'll have a lot more, I would say, freedom, some flexibility to do some stuff. So, me being a pilot played into that decision, or that picture for, our future as a family and as a couple. And I think, the financial part of it just made sense, the rough numbers anyway. And, you don't know what your flight training is going to cost till you're actually doing it, or well, I should say till you're actually done. Then you know what it costs in retrospect. But,
all the receipts and
the long receipts. But you're looking at rough numbers. I tell people, figure 8 to 10 grand for your private, and then you got to build some time. You got to do some stuff, get your instrument rating whenever it makes sense in there. And then your bare minimum is going to be $250 to take your commercial ride. So how cheaply can you build those hours, and how do you want to go about that? And then after that, it's, the big wide world of being a commercial pilot. Now how do you get paid to fly and continue to build that time to get in the seat of the plane you want to fly and in the quickest amount of time possible. So, I looked at it and told her, realistically, this is probably we'll call it 40 to 60 grand investment to go all the way through.
Sure.
There was almost no doubt in my mind that I would end up an instructor, just based on my, my history, my personality, my wiring. Coaching, teaching is something I love to do. So, it was a natural fit for me to do that. I just had to learn. I just had to learn the thing that I was going to be teaching.
Right.
I had to learn what an aileron was before I could tell somebody else.
Right. So that's a really good segue to what your educational plan was. Did you go to like a traditional flight school? Did you do just a freelance private instructor? What was your plan?
For private, I just, like I said, I did that discovery flight, and I was sitting in the left seat 2 days later. I did the discovery flight. I said, cool, I'm hooked. Let's do this. I already talked to my wife about it, or maybe we had the final conversation after that discovery flight, and then I just called the school right away. But that was just a Part 61 school at my local airport, flying all Cessna. And after that, I don't want to say I didn't have a plan, but I knew what I needed to do. I just didn't want to be locked into one specific thing.
Okay.
So I got done with that and, rented the plane a couple times, flew around a bit. I got checked out in they had a Piper Warrior at the time. I think the thing finally died. It was getting pretty weak, but I got checked out in that just to fly something different. I was like, now I'm introduced to the world of low wing. And the whole time I had done my training, they had a 6th generation Cirrus SR20 there.
Oh,
and I was like, that thing is pretty sweet, and I couldn't even spell Cirrus. My aviation, background was none. I'm still building all this literacy, but what I did was I used that. I did the Cirrus transition just so that I could fly this thing. And, I used that as part of my time building too. And some of my requirements that I knew were going to be coming up down the road for instrument and commercial. So every flight I did with my instructor for that Cirrus, I said, we are going 50 nautical miles. We will not stop short because I want these cross country, right? I want the time.
So
we made every trip 50 nautical miles or more so that I could log that as cross country time. And it's thankfully to G6, so it's got the 215 horses, so I got high performance out of it. I was really big in that phase of flying. I was really big on just making the hours work for me. And I think that's one of the biggest things I tell newer or younger pilots. I mean, I'm still a pretty new young pilot, but just look at it from that perspective. How can you make the dollars you're spending go the furthest, right? Toward that goal that you're eventually trying to get to. So I did. Back to kind of the path, I did the 61 local school for my private, got done with that. I would say I took it at a fairly accelerated pace. It wasn't at one of these accelerated schools that they advertised that, but I flew several times a week. And if they would let me, I would book 2 flights in a day too.
Okay.
So I flew quite a bit. Got my private done. When I got everything ready for my instrument, I actually did one of the accelerated courses for instrument, and that was helpful because I found a local school that did it, and I said, here's the deal, I don't need a date with a check ride at the end. I can take this 2 days at a time, 3 days at a time, because it's local. I can commute, I can work into your schedule if I can get in sooner. And they called me and said, yeah, hey, come on down, we'll work you in. So, I probably spent 2 or 3 weeks, I would say, on my instrument training.
Okay.
Even though the school, they advertise a 10-day course.
Sure.
probably took me closer to a month to get through everything, but I didn't fly every day and all that. And then I just went and built time like crazy. Looking at all those, commercial requirements, got it knocked out. And my commercial was all accelerated. I did commercial, CFI, and double I back to back to back weeks.
Wow.
I don't recommend it.
Well, that's a lot of stuff really fast.
I say this lovingly. It was the worst 3 weeks of my life. And it wasn't because of the school. It was just because of what I put on my plate. And it was a lot.
That's a lot. Were you studying at all before you got into that program then, or did you just jump in and just, yeehaw, let's go?
Yeah, that was kind of it. So while I was building time for commercial, again, I was just so focused on not spending money that I didn't need to spend.
Sure.
And so it was kind of like, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do for my commercial, and then I'll start spending the money on the instruction. But in the meantime, I'll work on it on my own. Well, I didn't know how to perform a chandelle. I didn't know what a lazy eight was. I watched Jason Shapert teach me how to do it, but it didn't correlate to the cockpit that I was sitting in.
Right. So. He makes it look so easy when he just a couple fingers on the controls and it's funny because now I fly like that, and of course, my name's Jason too, so I fly with a pilot buddy of mine, and he's always kind of dubbing himself in as Jason Shapert while I'm flying. I think he's mocking me lovingly, but he might be.
So I didn't like train to commercial, and this opportunity opened up. The guy at the school said, "Hey, and it was in a school that offered a different school, but one that offers these accelerated programs."
Yeah,
and it was a 5-day commercial, 5-day CFI, 5-day double I. And he said, "Hey, by the way, I can get you in a lot sooner than I thought." And I thought I was just doing one course with them. And so I said, "Sweet, get me in." And he goes, "Well, like a day before I was supposed to head up there, he goes, 'Oh, by the way, you want to do them all? I can get you through.'" I was like, I was not prepared. I had thought, okay, cool. It's going to be their job to teach me the commercial maneuvers that I need to know to pass the check ride. And the ground, right? So I had studied. I'd passed the written for commercial. Actually, I'd passed all 3 of the writtens at that point. So I kind of had the knowledge of it. That I just needed them to teach me and to take my check ride. But it was a tough 3 weeks. So I'll say that. So I did my commercial from the right seat, which was helpful for my CFI and double I then, but. That was the first time I had flown right seat. Was my first day there for this commercial program, and I'm learning new maneuvers from a new visual perspective in the cockpit, and it was a lot for 3 weeks. But I'm done with it. I'm thankful for being done with it. But yeah.
So where does that put you on your path now? Then, are you instructing or?
I am. Yeah. So right away, you're a brand new CFI with 250 hours. And, thankfully, I got through my double I as well. So I had kind of that edge going for me. And immediately it's like somebody paid me to fly an airplane. And for all the lower time aspiring commercial pilots out there, those unicorn opportunities do exist. Oh, my buddy got in on a jet at 350. Yeah, sweet. Good for your buddy. Yeah. Is he giving you any of his paycheck? Because I doubt it. So right away it was, what opportunities are there? Well, I'm a CFI, so I started sending my stuff out to pretty much every flight school in the nation. It got called by a couple out of state, and it just, none of it was really lining up to make a lot of sense for me to either leave my family to go instruct for, an indeterminate amount of time.
Yeah.
Or for us to uproot and move, which for, not to devalue the position, but for a flight instruction position, that there was just no way we were going to do that. Then I got called by one of the local schools here, and super busy, a lot of stuff going on, and, not too far of a commute. And I said, yeah, sign me up. So I went in and did the interview. They offered me a position, and I started there with full knowledge that per their contract with their students, all of their instructors are MEIs as well.
Okay.
And of course, I didn't hold that rating. So I said, what are we going to do? I'm a commercial single engine pilot and I'm CFI double I, but not MEI. So they made, a nice concession. They said, well, we'll give you the instructor for free. You just pay for the airplane for the multi. Said, okay, yeah, that sounds good. In the meantime, they were working with another program, another set of students that they didn't have that same agreement with. So I could instruct those students.
Okay.
And so that's what I did. I signed off my first 2 private pilots there in the midst of getting my commercial multi. And I missed it in the regs. Again, at this point, I was just over a year into my piloting career. I was still so fresh to it all. I completely spaced on the requirement that to add a rating to your instructor certificate, you have to have 15 hours of PIC time in the aircraft type that you're going to be flying for your MEI rating. So I had 4. I was 4 point something. I was just shy of 5. And I looked at the school and how much I was paying for the airplane and my prospects, so once I signed off those 2 privates and they passed, I was done. They had no more students for me that weren't subject to that MEI requirement.
Okay.
And so I had a meeting with the management there and I said, hey, it's going to cost me, upwards of $5,000 to keep working here. And we kind of knew this coming in, but I missed the fact that I need 15 hours of PIC. So what do you want to do? And they said, well, we're doing everything we can. We really can't cut the cost of the airplane down. And so I said, respectfully, then I think, I'd already had another offer at another local school. And so I said, no hard feelings, but I think I got to go there because they're not requiring me to get my MEI. And not that I don't want my MEI, I want it. It was really hard to stomach spending another $5,000 at that point.
Sure.
Well,
it's not like you don't have a family and kids to think about in that equation as well,
And that's just it. This school, they kind of homebreed most of their CFIs. Okay. They rate them, they get them through, and then most of them end up working there if they don't have another, path clearly laid out in front of them. So
sure.
I was an outsider, if you will, for them, and kind of an anomaly because, again, most of their CFIs are going through their program, so they're already MEI rated. They've already got everything that they need to keep working there. So, yeah, I made the transition to another local school as a contractor this time, not an employee.
Okay.
And, I walked into that with very direct kind of, mission. I said, I can't sign up for 21 days straight, to take a private pilot student. I have a family, I have obligations, I have another business that I run, in real estate. It's darn near impossible. And they're like, they were understanding of that, and it's worked out. I've signed off a couple students there. Actually, just got done with a private last week, but he was kind of a finish up. So
okay,
it's been a really great school because I can, for lack of a better term, I just tell them when I want to work. And if they have a student that kind of fits the bill for what I need, it's great. If they don't, then that's fine too. And I've been freelance instructing as well.
Okay.
I just keep trying to build that network, and I've made a couple really good connections that way. Freelance instructing just helped one of the guys that I found him on one of the local Facebook pilot groups.
Mm-hmm.
He was looking for an instructor that had serious time.
Okay.
And again, now that money that I spent up front getting my Cirrus transition all of a sudden paid off pretty well.
Right.
We connected. We seemed to be pretty compatible. And actually just Monday, he called me up and said, hey, I need to get my plane down to Marathon Key, down in Florida for the winter.
Yeah.
You want to take this flight with me? And, he's not instrument rated. So if there was going to be any weather, he was going to need somebody. And I said, let's do it, and he, paid me for my time going down there. And of course I got to log the hours, and, it's been really good. So again, kind of, making my way in that. I'm a part of a local club too. And I've got a private student that's, he just had his 4th flight. So we're at the early stages of his training through the club. But again, that's kind of just piecing it together and making it work for me as I go here.
So for you, how did the actual job of CFI compare to what you would expect it to be? Because it sounds like to me like you're the kind of guy who likes working with people, likes helping people and coaching. Is CFI work what you expected it to be?
For the most part, it has been.
Okay.
The one challenge, the one thing that I absolutely despise about being a CFI is anything on the ground. And not that I won't do it, but I'm like, let's go fly. That's my game. We're in the plane, we're able to do stuff, and and I love demonstrating stuff and showing it. And when you're drawing a traffic pattern on a whiteboard, it's just it's nothing.
Yeah.
A student pilot doesn't know what a mile from the runway looks like.
There's some experienced pilots that don't know what a mile from the runway looks like.
Some days I don't, so it's all good.
Oh, funny.
So it's been great. I think it's been a lot of what I expected. That first school that I worked with, all of their students take their ground as a different course or as a different part of their training.
Okay.
So we would of course do preps or briefs and debriefs. And there were some ground lessons. It was a 141 school, so there were a few ground lessons littered in, they're scattered in there during the course of their training. But for the most part, those students were just showing up, dispatching a plane, and we were going and flying. Okay. And, going to, the contract work with this other local school, these students are coming in for their accelerated style training, and, you're expected to give them everything, ground, flight, all of that. And again, I don't, it's so valuable. But I get so anxious. I'm like, I want to move. I want to go. I want to get in the plane. I want to show you what this looks like. I want to show you how to perform this. So I get a little impatient when I have to do ground.
Well, you just want to be in the air, man. I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So what is the plan for you moving forward? What direction do you want to go?
I think it's still kind of the path that I set out with the goal that I had in mind of that rotational schedule. As I got further into this, as I started instructing, I was like, man, I can still make this work. I can do an 8-6 or a 7 on, 7 off, or, you call it what it is. I could do a 15 on, 10 off, or whatever it is, and still have that time to instruct. I can still share that passion for teaching with people, I'm not going to necessarily be limited by that. And so I don't, at this point, I don't think it's the airlines. Okay. I think it's, I really do want to get into a reasonably well-paying, charter or corporate job, something where it's, something where it's not necessarily part-time. I think most aviation is part-time, but
yeah,
full-time pay for part-time work, but
sure.
Where I still have the freedom to, to have some time to do these other things. I don't think I'm a career instructor, but I do want to instruct throughout my entire career.
Sure. That makes sense. It makes total sense. It keeps you involved in the, bringing up of the next generation of aviators too. So that is admirable. So.
Yeah, I get so excited about it. I think some of my students are like, they might think I'm like a little overboard or something, because I'm like texting them like, hey, like, congrats on your private last week. I'm so proud of you. And they're like, who's this weirdo? Like you signed me off, but
well, it shows you.
I get excited, and I like when people get excited for me. Of course, who doesn't? So
yeah.
I try to remember that, that I'm here because I had a coffee with a buddy of mine who shared his passion for aviation with me, and I want to be able to do that for others. And yeah, it's such a cool, tight knit, close, small community that we can't afford to, we can't afford to just be brushing people off. And, I've never approached the CFI track as just a way to build time. It's so exciting to watch a student go from 0 flight time to private pilot, or to, for the first time, fly in the clouds and be like, oh my gosh, are we going to die? Like, I hope not. To just kind of see that wonder, in their eyes as they continue to progress on their own paths.
Right. Well, that's very cool. All right. So is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we haven't talked about that we maybe should?
I mean, there's so many ways we could go. I think one of the things that's been on my mind and heart a lot lately is as I continue to gain experience, I wish and I hope that new CFIs or aspiring commercial pilots will take this to heart. Care about the people that you're instructing. And it's so heavy on my heart because, it's just a month or two ago that everybody's been talking about it since. We had that instructor, I think it was down in Kentucky, that instructor and student that went into that thunderstorm and crashed. And, I don't know if the guy was trying to be sarcastic, and I'm not blaming, nobody else was in that cockpit. So it's hard for us to say what happened, it's hard for us to say what his attitude was, flying. But, unfortunately we have the social media posts and it looks a lot like he was just there to get the hours, get the paycheck and move on. And it is such a big responsibility. I was just having a conversation with the guy that we were flying down to the Keys, and I said, I was kind of shaking my head. We were talking about that story.
Yeah.
And I said, it's so sad because a brand new commercial pilot has no chance except to become a CFI, I'm overgeneralizing. Of course, there are ways you can build time without doing that, but, to make money and still rack up flight hours and to continue to, on this journey, really CFI is the big glaring one. And there's just a lot of people that shouldn't be instructors.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm the best instructor out there. I know I'm not. I've got so much to learn still, but I think the differentiating factor is that you need to care. You have to care for that person that's with you, and we talk about in CFI class, you talk about the law of primacy. It's something that you should know as a CFI. You are the one thing that student is going to keep coming back to in their moments of distress. So care. Yeah. That's my soapbox. That's my lead pastor moment for the night.
No, that's a very valid point. There are so many CFIs that are out there that it's a time building opportunity, because you're right. Some of those, they call it a unicorn job for a reason. I mean, they exist, but they're few and far between. So the most common path, it seems like a lot of people take, is CFI. So, and there's a lot of, it's not just, teaching and building hours. There's a lot of responsibility with that.
Yeah. And the flip side of that too, is I want to applaud all the CFIs that are out there, literally putting themselves out there for the first time. They're not teachers. They're not instructors. They don't have that background, that shared passion for this, like I do.
Yeah.
Good for you, for getting out there, for stepping out there and doing it. But again, as you're doing it, just care, have a lot of respect for the position that you've been given and take it seriously.
Awesome advice. Speaking of advice, do you have any other advice that you would give to someone who's looking to make a career transition?
I've met so many people, so many other pilots. They come from so many different, backgrounds. I don't. If it's something you're exploring doing, I think for me, it's all relative, right? But I think it's a pretty easy decision to make if you're considering it, to invest $8 to $10,000 to get your private pilot's license. Yes, that sounds like a big price tag, but you don't have to front it all up. Put it all up front. You can take it as you go, take little bites, and get your private over the course of 6 months or 8 months or a year, whatever. But if you enjoy doing it, then just figure out a way to make it work, because it does. You can make it work. The one thing that surprised me was besides the various backgrounds of so many pilots that I've met, I thought you had to, I think I was listening to, was it Alyssa that you had on?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was listening to hers, and, she didn't come from an aviation background.
No,
I shared so much of that sentiment that, oh gosh, I thought you had to be born, I thought you had to be born in the back of an airplane to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And you really don't. You can go into it and learn it at a reasonably, at a reasonably low price. And if you decide it's something you want to do, to me, it's a pretty small investment for a career that will, pay you back in relatively short order. So,
right.
Put yourself out there and do it and check it out. Go for that discovery flight.
Well, Jason, I can't thank you enough for sitting down and talking with me and sharing a bit about your story and where you're at in the process. So I do look forward to reaching out with you in the future as you make your way to a 135 program. So I wish you all the best in that journey.
Yeah, it's been a joy. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing the podcast. I know how much work it can be to produce stuff like this. So
yeah,
good on you, and it's valuable. So yeah, keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, that was an incredible conversation with Jason, and I want to thank him again for coming on the podcast and sharing his story with all of us. So a couple takeaways that I have from my conversation with Jason is, first of all, he talks about that he's his make his own way kind of guy, and I think that his ability to adapt and carve out his own path has helped him be successful as he's journeyed through aviation, and I think that will continue to serve him well as he moves forward in trying to get a 135 job. Another really important takeaway for anyone who's starting this process or is in the middle of it is if you listen to how he talked about making his dollar go as far as he could take it in the training environment. So that is a really key, important piece for those who might be trying to do this on a budget because it can be expensive to get into this thing we call aviation. So there's ways to go about that to make your dollar go a little bit further. So be smart with your time building and could end up saving you in the long run. So I reached out to Jason as I got ready to publish this episode and got an update from him. So he says with the weather turning nice in Minnesota, his instructing has really started to ramp up. He was also extended an opportunity to fly out with a parachute team and flew all of the jumps at the Duluth Air Show a couple of weeks ago. He talks about that it was a big stage, but everything went off without a hitch. All the drops were solid, and the demo teams for the different armed forces that were present were all top-notch quality people to hang out with. He did give a shout-out to Grouse and Trash Cat for all the good laughs over the weekend. Glad to hear everything's going good for you, Jason, and best of luck to you as you continue to chase down that dream. So coming up in our next episode, we're going to take a little bit of a turn and check out a different side of aviation that we haven't explored before on the podcast, the world of UAV or drone aviation. We're going to talk with Corey Palm, who originally got his pilot's license in 2001 with dreams of becoming an aerial spray applicator. But life would take some turns on him, and he would go into the fields of agriculture and paramedicine instead. But 20 years later, he would find his way back into aviation, but this time in the booming field of drone aviation, but also combining his spray application aspirations and using drones as a spray applicator. So join us next time as we hear Corey's journey and get a glimpse of that fascinating side of aviation. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to Fly the Transition. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like, rate, and leave a review. It really helps us out. So until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your dreams soaring high.
You've been listening to Fly the Transition. Life is too short for you not to do what you love. And our passion is to give you all the tools you need to make the transition from doing what you do to being in the aviation industry. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can reach out by email at flythetransition@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at Fly the Transition. And the website for Flying Midwest Media is flyingmidwest.com. Keep soaring. See you next time on Fly the Transition.